Right now, I want to get on to an announcement made earlier today by St. Louis County Executive Steve Stenger regarding what the county is going to do in terms of police pay now that the funds from Prop P will be rolling in later this year. We've got County Executive Stenger on the phone with us now. Steve, how are you?
Mark, I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, so you rolled this out this morning. I'm assuming this is in cooperation with and agreement with the County Police Officers Association, right?
That's right. We have a Fraternal Order of Police organization that's represented by Joe Patterson, and Matt Krasilis is a business agent, and they did a fantastic job in negotiating on behalf of their men and women. And the negotiations that we had they were tough negotiations, but they were negotiations that were conducted professionally. And I think everybody had the same interest at heart, which is we really wanted to see a number of different things come out of Prop P, one of which was increased pay for our officers, and today we delivered on that promise.
Yeah, and I think most people that went and voted on it, that was their number one priority. Of course, I live out in Wildwood, and we've already had discussions out there about the fact that I believe in December, people will municipalities in the county will start to see the first funds coming in from Prop P. So let's talk about how it's going to affect the pay scale, because I remember you and I had this debate, and I had Gabe Crocker on here one time talking about it, that the sticking point for many years was that somebody coming out of the academy would make $52,000 a year, and 10 years later they might still be making just $52,000 a year.
That's right. And Gabe was correct then that, compression is what is the term that's utilized by our officers and by us as well. Gabe was right then, and Gabe fought hard for this increase as well. And basically what we've done is dramatically changed the landscape for pay for police officers in St. Louis County. And the new starting salary is going to be $52,000, which is an increase from $48,000.
Okay.
And the top out is going to be $77,000 from a top out previously after 15 years of about $72,000. So, and then in between all of those various steps, there are differential increases that occur to relieve some of that compression, because as we were talking about before, we had a situation where somebody who's just starting is making the same as somebody who's been on and training them for 5 years. And that's really an untenable situation, and it was the result of this issue being ignored really for decades. And the police had gone without a meaningful increase and a meaningful means to address the decompression that they were experiencing. And today, as the result of these negotiations and finally, coming to a decision on it, we were able to make a major impact, I think, not only in police officers' lives, but also in our community safety. Because the main goal in increasing our police officers' pay and relieving that decompression is to attract and retain the very best officers that we can to interact with our public and to keep us safe.
And that pay scale, to be clear, affects patrol officers, right? That's assuming they're not promoted to sergeant or something like that over the years.
That's right. This
Okay.
is for patrol officers, and there will be additional announcements that will be made for pay increases for the remaining ranks. This is a group of individuals who's represented by the FOP. The other groups are represented in different fashion. So this addresses that first very large and the majority of the police force.
So just to ballpark it, from what I can tell, by year 3, 4, let's say year 5 out of the academy, they're up $6,000 or $7,000 over where they started. And if you just look at it from a cost of living perspective, that probably just about falls in line, right?
It does, and because of how far. And I've been county executive for 2.5 years, and one of the first things we did is we addressed the pay increase. And we did what we could then, but we have very limited funds. What we basically did is we took the surplus that we had for the year, and we put that into police pay so that we could retain and attract, to that small extent that, we wanted to make some kind of an impact. Well, that was nowhere near enough, and it's demonstrated by just how impactful these numbers are that we just put together and that we're putting forth. And this is all subject to county council approval as well, I should say that.
Sure.
Current officers will see an average one-time pay increase of about 30% next year, and that is significant. And then in future years, the increases average about 3% per year. So we kind of get caught up, and then from that point on, we move forward with increases that are commensurate with cost of living.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people had in mind when they voted for this thing. You're also, Chief Belmar's planning to add, 110 new officers?
Yeah, what we talked about when we were, when we were trying to move this initiative forward is we wanted to hire more officers, we wanted to improve police pay, we wanted to mobilize more two-officer vehicles for officer safety and also for interacting with the public in a more meaningful way. We wanted to improve technology. We wanted to add things like body cameras and dashboard cameras and other modern technology. And then we just have basic equipment that we need to keep officers safe while they keep us safe. But as you talked about hiring more officers, that's another really key component to what I think voters were looking for. And it is the chief's plan, it is my plan, it is the police department's plan that what we'd like to see is about 110 more officers. And, I will tell you, it's very difficult to make that happen immediately. It will happen over time, but we will see the bulk of those officers, I think, in this first year coming up. But the logistics are a little challenging because the money doesn't start coming in until December.
Right.
And it's not the beginning of December. It's more toward the middle of December. So logistically speaking, we need to have those officers kind of ready to go so that in January we can begin this whole, it'll be a complex hiring process because we'll have experienced officers, we'll have new officers, and then we'll, be assimilating them into our force.
So I know that the term public safety was used in how this money can be utilized. That's kind of a broad term. I started to realize as I dug into it a little more in our own budget. What else will that money go toward?
Yeah, for us, when we talk about public safety, and it was police and public safety. I think what you're also going to see is you will see an increase in pay for St. Louis County prosecutors because they suffer from much the same compression issues that the police department. And, our St. Louis County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, that is pure law enforcement. That is pure public safety. As we make more cases through, the increase in officers that you may see, as we have, more robust police activity, we will certainly have more cases for prosecutors and whatnot. So I think what you will see is more bodies in the prosecutor's office, and I think you will see an increase in pay there as well. And there will likely be something and we talked about this during the campaign, for our justice services personnel, our jailers. There will probably be something in there as well. There's also a law of law enforcement as well.
We're talking to County Executive Steve Stinger. Steve, I know you and I talked when this was still on the ballot, and I expressed to you that some of the listeners to this program and others and myself, the biggest concern was there was nothing in here to guarantee that future politicians wouldn't just replace some of the general fund expenditures they were using for public safety with this new cash that they're suddenly flush with.
Sure.
Have you made a commitment to make sure that doesn't happen in St. Louis County?
Yeah, for St. Louis County, what you will see proposed for our budget for next year, and you will see this in black and white print very shortly, as a budget will be presented to the St. Louis County Council in November. You're going to see what we've always, put into law enforcement in the general fund, which is about $105 million. And added to that, for law enforcement, you will see, I should say police and public safety, what you will see is the additional $46 million that the county receives. So our budget will be the $105 that we've always put in and the $46 million. And, with the way our charter is written, it's really not possible to put together an ordinance that locks in an amount for the general fund. It just is not. Our general fund revenues and the revenues within our funds flow forward to the next year as written in our county charter so that money is available to operate government. But I can tell you from myself, there's a pledge, and I pledge that this money will be spent in the fashion that we have indicated in the budget and that I'm telling you it's going to be spent. And as you can see, and you will see, we will have multiple announcements about hiring more officers. We've done already one step of the improving police pay, mobilizing the two officer vehicles, and all of the various items of technology that we're going to need to move forward. And we will have, we're doing all of this for one reason and one reason only, and that is to improve public safety, to keep our residents safe. It's our number one priority.
Very good. Steve Stinger, County Executive, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mark. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about
You bet. Have a great day. I appreciate him giving us a few minutes. And I've still got to tear into this thing. They sent me this proposed increase in pay for the county police officers just for at the patrol level. And then, of course, at sergeant and the upper levels, lieutenants, captains, things like that, of course, they will also see a bump out of this, I'm sure. But they were primarily interested in those patrol level officers because of the compression system that had been in place for many years that didn't really give these folks a raise. I mean, you may argue that $52,000 is a decent paycheck, but my experience in life is that it doesn't matter what your pay scale, how much you're making, unless you're super rich, your expenses tend to rise to meet that. That's kind of been my experience. So if you're at $52,000, that's great. If 10 years later you're still at $52,000, that's not so great. You got to at least get some kind of a cost of living increase in there. So I'm glad to hear that this is something that at least the FOP was on board with. So they must have gotten some consent from the police officers to this, and they'll get about an average, he said, of 30%. 30% bump at some point in pay, and then it would go up about 3% a year after that going forward. There are still questions out there, but we've got the county executive on the record there and on tape, even though we don't use tape anymore, on digital recording somewhere, that they're not going to misplace these funds for general funds. That's a good thing. That makes me feel better. Get to more of your phone calls on this. We've got Mayor Adam Paul from Ellisville coming up on the action his city took last night on the city-county merger issue. It's all coming up right here on The Mark Cox Show.